Okay, good morning and welcome to beautiful Bullseye Country Club. And the talk of the day is, at least we're not in North or South Dakota. That's what they've been. No, we appreciate you. This is a nice turnout. We want to make this both in kind of informal, get a chance to speak and hear from our elected officials. And then you will have time at the end for some Q&A. So again, thanks for attending. Before we start, let's honor America if we could stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Good morning again. My name is Craig Tim. I work for Domtar. It's always my pleasure to help the chamber out as the moderator for this event. And I don't believe we have a date yet, but I'm guessing we'll see everybody again in the spring, because I don't know if you're familiar, but in the next year and a half, there's, I think, an election coming up or something. I don't know if you've noticed that. I mean, 2020 is going to be like a nothing year, especially in the fall. I heard a news reporter last night basically say, why don't we just say 2020? You know, this November of 2020 is just everybody's up for election. Why don't we just put everybody in there? So, again, we want to thank our sponsors, and if you're here, wave or stand. Our folks, friends at Enbridge, oh, she's here, Enbridge back here, thank you very much. Our folks at Urkel Worldwide, thank you very much. And our folks at Domtar, that's me, thank you very much. Marty Burkhart, our general manager at Nakusa, would have been here this morning, but if you're around Nakusa, it's a busy place. It's our year-and-a-half total maintenance cold outage, so he is obviously probably sleeping there for 9 days. And they have about 380 contractors from all over the country that are in that neck of the woods. So if you see them anywhere, just welcome them. Tell them thank you for being here. Last time they were here was April, a year and a half ago, give or take. And that was the post-Easter 30-inch snowstorm, and that was right in the middle of that. So some of those folks still talk about that because a lot of them are from Alabama, Georgia, so they didn't even know where to park. So, again, we thank the chamber for this also this morning. Like to ask our panelists to come up. We have State Senator Patrick Teston, District 24. Good morning, Patrick. Good morning. Assembly District 72, Representative Scott Krug, who I'll probably call a congressman. I do that for some reason every time. And Assembly District 70, we know Representative Nancy Vandermeer is en route, so she'll be coming. We'll welcome her when she gets here. Also like to introduce our Wood County Board Supervisor. Our chair is Doug Mahan. Doug is just, no, you can just sit there with the phone.
Formal is my bag.
We'll ask you for an update on a couple things as we get further along into the program. Anyone else that is an elected official in any capacity in any municipality, would you please stand? We'd like to welcome and recognize you. Thank you for your service. Mayor Brewer, that was probably the best time to go get coffee, so you were already standing. So what we're going to do is, oh yes, if you'd want to introduce yourself to the crowd from Senator Ron Johnson's office. Welcome.
Yeah, it's been a quiet week. Mike Holland from Senator Ron Johnson's office, so happy to be here. I've seen a lot of you previously, but good to be back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So what we have, good. Timing is impeccable. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you.
Each of our elected officials, we have questions for them, and we've asked them to spend 5 minutes or so discussing some pertinent issues for Wood County. And I'm going to start with Representative Krug. With new leadership in the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, can you shed some insight on the organization and what does the agency do, or particularly what can how does it assist Wood County and specifically central Wisconsin?
Good.
I'd love to have your comment. You can
I'll just stand where I am.
stand is perfectly
Yeah.
fine.
To sit and try to talk to everybody. So good morning. Thanks for being here. It's great to have a packed crowd here. This is one of the keystone events for us to get a chance to communicate back to the business community and local leaders about things that are going on in Madison. One of the exciting things, and I'm glad we had the question, was about WEDC. One of the first votes I took when I started in 2011 was the creation of the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, replacing the old Commerce Department model that we had in the state forever and ever. One of the most exciting things I think about that vote is it's paying off for central Wisconsin and Wisconsin Rapids in particular. WEDC basically works as a public-private type entity to try to drive businesses to the state of Wisconsin and help businesses here expand and grow and maintain their footprint. And needless to say, I think they've been doing a great job. We just saw, last week was it, right? It was just last week here in the East Side Industrial Park in Wisconsin Rapids that we had the grand opening, or the groundbreaking, I should say, for Metalco, a new manufacturer coming to the city of Wisconsin Rapids for the first time in quite a long time. So that's an exciting thing for WEDC to create that program for the, certified site program to help them find a place and pre-certify some ideas of where they can go in the state of Wisconsin. I think we're 1 out of 14 sites in the state, so it's nice to get that site filled. There are other sites around the state that were very competitive with us to try to make sure that they had an opportunity too, but Wisconsin Rapids stepped up and proved to the business community, and Metalco in particular, that they had the right assets at the right time. Working with the ideas and people that we have behind the helm at WEDC, getting some business individuals behind the helm instead of some bureaucrats behind the helm, helped drive this project to completion. So that was a big win. WEDC does more than just business development though. WEDC's had a hand in the Boys and Girls Club YMCA project and trying to do some site remediation to make sure that that site's environmentally safe to proceed on. And you see, if you've been past there any time recently, there's quite a bit of development and progress at that project. WEDC has been vital in trying to make sure that we develop more regional partnerships. Economic development is always tough, right? When you start to fight municipality to municipality, it's a tough thing to do. WEDC has kind of taken the helm and tried to regionalize it a little bit to start leveraging our assets coming together, getting everybody out of their silos and working on common ideas for common good. So I think it's been a net positive. And I'm not going to sit here and say that when WEDC first started there weren't a lot of growing pains, but I think that's really indicative of what happens when you start a business of itself. It's not easy the first couple of years. It's got road bumps. You're going to want to, you're going to want to throw in the towel once in a while. You're going to want to just try to start over. But sticking with it, kind of the same model that anybody would in their own small business, it's helped WEDC grow and fashion itself into something that's turned into a powerhouse for economic development across the United States, not just for individuals here. It's proven to be a model for a lot of other states to pick up the ball and start rolling down the hill with great ideas. So we've got, they were instrumental in a huge deal for Quick Trip, getting the distribution center going for Quick Trip and La Crosse, Foxconn obviously. So we can literally say that billions of dollars of economic activity have come to Wisconsin because of the ability for us to get WEDC off the ground and get going. So I think as we keep going into the future, seeing them come and step up to the table to bring ideas to central Wisconsin, we've got to be open to the idea that WEDC is a good thing for us now. We also saw WEDC involved in our community project with Courage to try to get the Tribune project to the point where it was viable for the state budget, which we were successful in getting through this session. So there's a lot of little things that WEDC can do for us here in Wisconsin Rapids and Wood County and central Wisconsin as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a little side note, and those of you that work with Metalco, I can tell you, just by pure luck, I was on a flight it was the day before their groundbreaking, because it was that rainy Friday. It was
Well, they all are rainy Fridays.
Yeah. And it was Thursday night coming back from Detroit in a lightning storm. So anyway, that was fun. But anyway, I sat down next to a gentleman that had a Metalco shirt on, and of course introduced myself, told him that I live in Wisconsin Rapids, etc. And we talked for about an hour, coming back, and he could not say enough good things about the cooperation from the chamber, from Incura, he just named off all these agencies, the mayor's office. So anyone that had anything to do with Metelco's selecting Wisconsin Rapids area, they are more than excited to be here. So I thought I'd share that this morning. I mean, he went on and on and on about the nice people. Said I stop at Quick Trip, they come up and they talk to me. They don't even know me. I mean, he just said it's just a nice place. And he's actually, I think he's stationed in Indiana area. But anyway, he's the regional manager.
Oh, yeah.
And he's really, so that's a nice one. Senator Teston, that'd be you.
I think so.
Okay. You are the lead author on the Farm Freedom Act, which reintroduced hemp cultivation to Wisconsin. And you're currently working on the Growing Opportunities Act, which transitions Wisconsin to a permanent hemp program. What role do you think hemp can play in economic development in central Wisconsin? And why is that one of your key topics? Where's your passion on that item? Well, we'd love to have an update.
Sure.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, it's kind of an interesting story, and great to see everyone here. So the Farm Freedom Act was an act that, if you would have asked me coming into office if I thought I would be the poster boy for industrial hemp here in the state of Wisconsin, I would have said you were crazy. But I'm glad I am, because I think this is a great opportunity for us to reintroduce a brand new, well, not brand new, a former industry, reintroduce it back into the state and help Wisconsin farmers and our processors here in the Badger State. So way background, so back in 2017, we introduced the Farm Freedom Act, which, thanks to the 2014 Farm Bill that was passed by Congress and signed into law by President Obama, left it up to the states to create these pilot programs to reintroduce industrial hemp. So anyone who's not real familiar with hemp, so hemp is often gets referred to, it's more nefarious cousin of the marijuana plant, but hemp can't contain more than 0.3% THC concentration, so there's no psychoactive high. And there's so many different uses and applications for hemp, from the more traditional uses for textiles, for ropes, to some of the ones that are being used more often today for CBD oil to help people with chronic pain, seizure disorders. But then there's also the ability to use it for things like hempcrete, which is a replacement for concrete, the ability to use it for graphene for batteries, Kevlar, fire retardant materials. There are so many different uses. I think there's like 25,000 different uses for biodiesel. And so that bill went through, got passed both houses unanimously, was signed into law by Governor Walker, and in 2018 we had our first hemp harvest since 1957. And in fact, I actually got to take part in the hemp harvest. I worked with Deb and Mike Omernick, some farmers in my area, over in the Rochelle area, and I got to work their harvest with them. And they're using their seed to produce biodiesel right on site, which is going in turn to operate their tractors. So then in December 2018, there were some huge changes at the federal level. So with the passage of the 2018 Farm Bill and having that signed into law by President Trump, there were some major changes for the hemp industry throughout the entire country. So one, they removed it from the controlled substance list, which was huge. They also allowed for interstate commerce, and then they made some other changes. They also changed the definition of hemp from industrial hemp to just hemp, which we didn't anticipate. So right away we began to work with then the Walker administration, then with the transition into the Evers administration, working with the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection to take a look and ensure that we create a law to make sure that our program is in line with changes at the federal level, and also to make sure that our program becomes a permanent program administered through the state. Because if we as a state do nothing, our program then gets administered by Washington. And no offense to Mike and any of our other federal partners, but I'd rather have our program administered here at the state level as opposed to in DC. We also made some other changes to the program. So when we crafted the law originally back in 2017, we had some provisions in there that, looking back on it, I think we did more harm than good to the industry. We had a provision in there that if you were enrolled in the program, you couldn't communicate with anyone else within the program. So right away we created this bottleneck or this chokehold where farmers can talk to other farmers about their production. Farmers weren't able to get connected to processors, and so we opened that up, so now people have the ability to communicate, so we can have a free flow of communication. There are some other provisions that we put into this legislation to provide some more confidence within the marketplace. Now, anywhere you go right now, you can go into any gas station, any convenience store, and you're often going to see a sign that says CBD sold here, which I'm a CBD user myself. I use it for chronic pain as a sleep aid, but there were some instances around the state where products were coming in, and these issues were raised by law enforcement, where there were instances where some of these products that claimed to be CBD either had no CBD whatsoever in them, or in some cases, it was more THC than what was allowed under the law. So these were essentially marijuana products, which was a cause for concern. So within the legislation we crafted, we have a truth in labeling component, which is going to provide more assurances that as that product leaves from the farm field to the processor, then into a retail distributor, that law enforcement consumers are going to know exactly what's in that bottle or what's in that product, trying to build confidence within the marketplace. Some of the other provisions that we did in there, ensuring that we have more safe harbors for some individuals, like when their crop comes back and it tests higher than above the legal threshold of 0.3% THC, that they have the ability to work with DACCAP to repurpose that crop. Because we have run into some issues this fall where some crops have come in too hot, and because we've had a huge surge in the number of growers here in the state, they've been told they have to cut, or basically destroy that crop. And that's the other thing too, what I'm really excited about, is we talk about what opportunities mean for this. So in year one of this program, we had 250 growers sign up and 100 processors. That's more than any other state that has had a hemp pilot program introduced since 2014. In year two, we had over 1,500 growers sign up and over 700 processing applications. That's a six-fold increase. No other state has seen a surge like that in the country, which tells me that Wisconsin farmers and entrepreneurs are eager and ready to lead the nation again in this crop. We were once the national leader going back to the early 1900s through World War I and World War II. We had a lot of hemp growing operations around the state. And primarily in places like central Wisconsin, we have a very suitable climate and soil structure for this crop. And when you take a look at the fact that our commodity prices and our farm economy are at a 5-year low, we've seen our dairy industry suffer greatly over the last 15 years. In the last 15 years, we've lost 49% of our dairy farms, small dairy farms. So a lot of farmers are looking for opportunities to incorporate a new crop in their portfolio that offers higher margins and hopefully can ensure that our family farms don't become a thing that we read about in our history books 20, 30, 40 years from now. Now, when you take a look big picture, or I guess I should say more of a local picture, there's a lot going on in the hemp industry right here in Wisconsin Rapids. So Nutritiva, based in Port Edwards, they're getting the hemp game. Anyone who's not familiar with them, I went and toured their facility 2 months ago now. And primarily they've been in the business of the cranberry industry. They press seeds and skins for protein powders and other cosmetics. And it's really innovative stuff. But now they're looking at hemp. In fact, they want to make hemp protein powder. And when I was talking with these individuals, I said, how does this compare to other like protein powders around the market? They said it's way more effective than, say, whey protein. Think about that. A plant-derived protein that is more effective than a dairy-produced whey. But also, and they haven't made this public yet, but they're working on plans right now, and they're working with the Wisconsin Hemp Manufacturers Alliance on a new facility, and one that many of us are familiar with, the old mill here in Port Edwards, that they've recently made an agreement, and they're going to be making an announcement in the near future about future plans for that, and it's going to be revolved around the hemp industry. But here's an opportunity for central Wisconsin to serve as a hub for growers all around the state to have their plants processed and dried. And so I'm really excited about this because I do, and I've said this before, I think this is Wisconsin's comeback crop. I've heard people talk about this in the same way that this could be a specialty crop, much like cranberries and potatoes, and since we're in Wood County, we grow both of those extremely well. And I'm really excited about the chance and opportunity to have hemp join that mantle because it's a great opportunity, not just locally, but when you take a look nationally, we import about $600 million worth of imported hemp from countries like China, India, Canada, And now we have the opportunity to grow it right here at home. And I think our farmers are eager for this. Our entrepreneurs are eager for this. I mean, it's not every day that when we vote on legislation that it opens up 700 new businesses in the processing world. It's not every day that you have 1,500 applications get filed in the state for people that want to grow this. So there's a tremendous opportunity, and the bill just went through the state Senate on Tuesday. We had 33 votes, 2 against. So it's a great sign, and I believe the Assembly is hoping to take it up in November, and we can hopefully get on the governor's desk and sign it into law, so we can provide more opportunities and potential for this industry. And so I'm really excited about it. And like I said, I never dreamed I would be in this position to help reintroduce this back to the state, but I'm sure glad I am, because hemp is back, and it is Wisconsin's comeback crop for sure.
Thank you very much, Senator. Representative Vandermeer, can you describe your work on the Speaker's Task Force on suicide prevention?
Yes.
And what legislation are you proposing, et cetera? And just an update on that for us, too.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see you here, and I apologize for being a little bit late. I come from Toma, so both Scott and Pat know sometimes the challenges of getting here first thing in the morning. But anyway, it's good to be with all of you. And I appreciate the question about the Speaker's Task Force on Suicide Prevention. And let me give you a few statistics. Every 9 hours in Wisconsin, we lose someone to suicide. The at-risk, the group that sees the highest frequency of suicides, are males age 45 to about 54. We also noticed that the #1 cause of death among our adolescents between 10 and 19 is due to loss from suicide. What's even more sad about this whole situation is these rates are considerably higher in rural areas, because many times it's a hidden problem, and sometimes, of course, lack of resources. Our suicide rates have increased considerably, sometimes up to 40% in the last 20 years, since about 1999. And as far as how Wisconsin stacks up across the United States, Wisconsin is about the middle of the pack as far as suicide rates. So we want to start that conversation. We knew that when we got into our work on the Suicide Prevention Task Force, we knew that we wouldn't, of course, be the end of our conversation. This is really just the beginning of legislation that we can, and policy work that we can utilize and work on into the future. So the way that we worked on this bipartisan panel was we traveled around 6 different sites around the state. And our idea was to focus on at-risk groups. And so we looked at EMS, firefighters, law enforcement as one group, students, veterans, and of course, farmers. And one of our hearings was held up here at the Marshfield Clinic at the National Farm Medicine Center. So that was very compelling. Personally, in Monroe County, I'm part of the Monroe County Mental Health Coalition, and I've been involved with that for several years now. And I'm really very excited to be a part of that. In the Assembly, I also serve on the Health Committee and the Mental Health Committee. So I felt that this brought a lot of my experiences together, being able to serve on the special task force. So at any rate, when we traveled around the state, there were some common themes that we saw throughout those who came to testify. And we heard from professionals, professional caregivers, for example, in the psychiatry field, but then we also heard from members of those at-risk groups and personal stories. The personal stories were very compelling. Family members who lost loved ones to suicide, and the barriers and the challenges to getting that treatment to them, and what they could see that perhaps we could get involved in to make a difference. So some of the areas that I have seen through my work with our Monroe County Mental Health Coalition, as well as our Speaker Task Force, was that of stigma. #1, we have to normalize the conversation, and normalize it to the point where mental health care, mental wellness is like that of, maybe that of cancer or some of the other illnesses that we think of more physical. But now we know with modern medical testing that indeed mental health is truly a physical illness as well. And I'll give you a little example. Those who are in those at-risk groups are subject to prolonged stress many times in their lifestyles and their professional work. And that can cause a buildup of cortisol in the brain. And that can also affect the way that you carry on your life. It can affect decision-making abilities, etc. So this is a real measurable physiological quality that we can measure in those that are dealing with depression, maybe more extreme depression, that could lead to suicide. So the other area that we saw also was peer support. A lot of veterans, for example, want to talk to veterans. Farmers want to talk to farmers. And we saw that across all of the spectrum for the at-risk groups. But so in addition to that, we also had a request of how do you find these services? How do you engage with those willing to provide service? And so that was one of the areas that we also deal with in the Monroe County Coalition as well. So our legislation, one of the bills that I have authored, is a grant program. And it will provide a total of $500,000 through the biennium to provide $10,000 grants to coalitions in counties. And what this will help is just really with some of those issues that I presented. Peer support, a resource. Where do we find these local sources, especially in our rural areas? One of our farmers testified that he had dealt with some very serious mental health issues brought on by the Great Recession back in '09, and that was kind of his stepping off point. Very successful farmer. He wanted to be able to continue on in his beloved profession. And so after treatment and trying to find the right treatment, he said, I wanted to be there as a resource for other farmers, now dealing with what we're going through as a 5th year of a downturn in the agricultural economy. So consequently, this particular farmer testified that he had started a support group in his church. And this really is an example of stigma, peer support, and resources that I talk about, because he said he has farmers come as far as several hundred miles away because of the stigma issue to his support group. So we're hoping to provide those type of experiences and not only let people know where the resources are, but being able to create that avenue for them to actually engage in them as well. That's just my bill, for example. But we have a number of them that will go out. We also have one that will create an Office of Suicide Prevention through the Department of Health Services. And then a lot of our other various bills that are rolling out will come under that umbrella of that office. So we're looking forward to being able to make a difference in a lot of Wisconsin lives. So thank you. And if you have any questions, please reach out to my office.
Thank you very much. Representative Krug, member of the Speaker's Task Force on Water Quality. Can you give us an update on that? And I know Senator Teston is also involved with that.
So yeah, the speaker has been pretty proactive this session on putting together a special task force, giving us assignments to get out across the state of Wisconsin. The Adoption Task Force, Nancy's on the Suicide Prevention Task Force, Senator Teston and I are in the Water Quality Task Force. It's been, the last 8 years working on this issue. I've had a little deeper knowledge than some of those who had come on to the task force from the other parts of the state. But one thing that I lacked, that I picked up on even as we toured around the 13 cities we went to in the state of Wisconsin, is I was very focused on water quality for my district, right? I was worried about how the Central Sands water quality issues played on surface water issues for blue-green algae on Petenwell, on nitrate contamination for wells in certain areas of our counties. I didn't really grasp the full magnitude of the issue for the entire state. And that's one thing I think the task force have done a great thing on, is not just not just the water quality, but suicide prevention and adoption and mental health before that, and a few other task forces, have really helped open legislators' eyes to the bigger problems. Sometimes we get so focused on how we fix our problems in our own districts that we forget that there's the rest of the state of Wisconsin that we have to help out too. So I think the thing that really came across for me and the Water Quality Task Force and the experience that I had in the tours that we took was the shared experiences that people are having with nitrate issues across the state of Wisconsin, the shared experiences that we're having for some surface water quality issues. Ours is a little bit different. Ours is more from the phosphorus issue. Other parts of the state are dealing with runoff from, say, mining operations, or other states or other parts of the state are talking about more arsenic and bacteria issues. And I think one of the things that's going to come out of that task force is an idea for partners across the state, whether they're municipalities, whether they're counties, whether they're private businesses, universities. I think one of the big ideas that's going to come out of the Speaker's Task Force on Water Quality is a grant program for innovation. Try to help individuals in their own communities develop ideas that are going to be helpful for them locally. You know, it comes back to all politics is local. It all comes back to all solutions are local. And I think that one of the big things we talk about on that task force is that a one-size-fits-all fix for one type of problem in one part of the state doesn't work. We need to divvy this up. So it is interesting to hear about some of the problems in other parts of the state and be cognizant of it. So when people talk about it, we've got some experience, but our experiences are unique. Our experiences are the ones that we need to deal with, and I think the biggest item that we're going to see out of that idea for innovation and that grant program is we're going to challenge not only municipalities, but the private sector being as absolutely creative as they possibly can, and trying to drive innovation and creation is going to lead to ideas that haven't been used before. We've had a couple of these ideas have come up in the past that maybe have not materialized fully. If anybody from Adams County remembers the idea behind GITES, way back in 2010, there was an innovative company that wanted to propose a new solution. Didn't quite come forward, but it kind of gave us a stepping stone for this idea to say, I know there's people smarter than us in the legislature who can help develop these ideas, who we can help drive innovation, and we can start driving business development in their communities and their businesses to help us generate those ideas of the future. What we've been doing with water the last 50 years doesn't work so well. We look to our partner, to our neighboring states. We look to Minnesota. Minnesota, we talk about a lot in a lot of different things, and one of the things that we learned from the Minnesota experience over in our La Crosse hearing was that Minnesota created a statewide tax through a referendum. That tax has raised about $2.2 billion over the last 6 or 7 years that it's been in existence. They've spent about $2.2 billion on nitrate issues out of that fund. And you know how far they've moved the needle on nitrates? 0. Money isn't going to fix our problem. A new tax isn't going to fix our problem. Creativity and innovation is about the only chance that we've got to try to really make a dent into this. One of the things that was really creative that we did in the 2013 budget was create the producer-led watershed program, where we allowed individual communities to work together in the farm community and the conservation community along with their county agencies to come up with individual projects and individual watersheds to fix individual problems. That's the way we're going to make our bigger dent in some of these water quality situations. It's not going to be a giant check, across the state of Wisconsin saying, here's $100 million, everybody, we're going to be happy now. Don't be fooled. The money is not going to fix this. We're going to change some practices. We're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to do some zoning changes. We'll have to do some land use idea changes. We'll have to be really responsible at all levels of government to try to figure out what the next best solution is for each individual watershed. So that's what I think is the biggest takeaway from this task force. The 13 communities that we had a chance to visit, from Superior to Milwaukee, from La Crosse to Green Bay, and everywhere in between, it's been a heck of an experience. So, speaking on that local side of it, we're really keen in on trying to make sure that Lake Petenwell and Camelot in particular, over the next 5 years, look as good as they did this year. Yes, there were a few days of green, but it's been a heck of a lot worse. So to that fact, the EPA has approved the TMDL that we started way back in 2009 that we helped get funding for throughout the process. That total maximum daily load idea is where we determine up and down the entire Wisconsin River watershed how much phosphorus can be introduced, by who, and for how long. And every individual permittee up and down the Wisconsin River system is now going to have a new permit based on the studies and the facts and the science that came out of that TMDL. So you're going to see some marked improvement over the course of the next 5 years because those permits are coming due for a lot of people up and down the Wisconsin River watershed. The TMDL that's been approved by the EPA here is the biggest in the country, by far. It is the entirety of the Wisconsin River system, from the North Woods down to Lake Wisconsin. So this is something that we've been working on for a very long time. We're starting to see some results from. These site-specific criteria play into what we're talking about for innovation, creativity, and local ideas. Because we're going to make sure that all up and down the chain, people are only introducing what the system can handle. So it's great to be out on the Wisconsin River to talk about how big of a project that is. You know, back in the 70s, it was a pretty nasty river back in the 70s because we had some challenges that the government had decided that we're going to take on head first. The Clean Water Act helped clean up the Wisconsin River once before, and now we're starting to make sure that the Wisconsin River is clean into the future. So there's a lot of great things going on the Water Quality Task Force, and I think that's just starting off, getting going this session. We'll see some bills come up January, February. That'll get some local ideas into the system and get some people creative and innovative to fix some of the problems we're seeing.
Thank you. Senator Teston, you authored a bill with Representative Nygren to encourage building of more workforce housing, which is, of course, a huge need in Wood County. Can you maybe explain what your bill is, what direction, what it's meant to do, and a little bit update on housing, especially in Wood County and central Wisconsin?
So this is, I'm sure, talking to a room full of business folks, I'm sure you hear from all your employees and you've seen it firsthand. Now, I guess I'll just ask the question, how many of you run the problem that there's not enough affordable workforce housing here in the area? Just about everywhere. And that's a huge problem. And when you take a look at some of the challenges that we face, given the fact that we've got roughly anywhere between 90 to 95,000 jobs available in the state. You drive around most businesses here in the area, you still continue to see help wanted signs, now hiring. People are desperate for able-bodied people to come into their places and work. But it's hard to get them to come work here in this area if they don't have a place to live. And so I've authored legislation with State Representative John Nygren that would create workforce housing credits for businesses and other groups who take advantage of that would award workforce housing credits up to capped at $10 million to help offset some of the costs for affordable housing in areas that, primarily rural areas with a population density of 155 people or less per square mile. So Wood County would qualify, Adams County would qualify, many of the counties in this area would qualify for this. And similar to what we did with the low-income housing tax credits bill that I had worked on last session, it follows around that same mold that we're trying to entice and incentivize companies and other organizations to participate in these programs to create new housing opportunities right here in places like Wisconsin Rapids. And I think that's going to go a long way to further entice individuals and companies in places like Wisconsin Rapids. So that way when, companies like Metalco come in and they've got, 80 jobs available, 130 jobs available, that when they're looking for workers, that people don't have to go 40, 60, 70 miles commute to come there and work. We want to be able to ensure that they can come here and stay here and continue to build up our community. So it's legislation that we're still working with the administration on. They've got some questions on the approach that we're taking, but essentially what it would do, be using some of the surplus funds that WIDA accumulates every single year and using that money to fund this new program. Now, they've raised some concerns that they don't want to spend the surplus, but my contention is that, well, you have a surplus and you've been sitting on a surplus for years, let's put that money to good use, and I can't think of a better way to do that than ensuring that we have quality, affordable housing for our workforce right here in rural Wisconsin. So it's legislation that we're still fine-tuning right now. There may be some changes coming through the pipes on that, but it's one that we're hoping to have ready for the floor this fall. And obviously it's an issue that every employer that we've been talking to has said, yeah, we need something like this. And so as we continue working that, we'll keep you posted, but also engage with us and let us know what you like about it, what you don't like, and we'll be more than happy. We can get the language to Angel, and she can get it out to all the members here. So hopefully we'll get it done this fall.
Thank you very much. Representative Vandermeer, this is one I personally know you love talking about. The Nurse Licensure Compact Reauthorization Act, which is Assembly Bill 70, which of course you know. Can you speak to that? I know the nursing is a place in your heart, so can you talk a little bit, give us an update on that, kind of what that is?
And actually, the title is Interstate Medical Licensure Compact. But that's fine. I did the nurse compact too, so thank you.
Oh, thanks.
So two different things, and we could talk quite a bit about this. But you know, when we talk about AB 70, the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, I would say 1.0 Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, I authored in 2015. And it was one of my first bills. It was a rather new idea for our legislature. So in that process, there was a lot of give and take. There was a lot of discussion. And so what our Interstate Medical Licensure Compact sought to do was, and I had served on my local hospital board, so I was aware of what the description of the scenario that I'm going to tell you, but in the credentialing process, when physicians transfer into Wisconsin, sometimes that credentialing process can take months. And the idea when we finally get a physician into a rural area is we want them to be able to practice right away. So what we did, we created a compact of states. And we needed 17 states back in 2015 to enact the compact. We were number 12. And we wanted to be one of the first states at the table to be involved with the rulemaking process for the compact. The compact, the physicians would use the compact for their credentials, kind of a clearinghouse. So when other compact states would access that information, it would be consistent from time to time if physicians would transfer. So what we did, we were, of course, number 12. The compact became active when the 17th state signed on. Today, there are over 28 states in the compact. So it's grown in popularity. But you know, so many times we develop legislation, we enact it, we put it into law. And what's exciting about this is because we tell you what happened to it. And when that give and take process started with the compact, one of our legislators was very concerned about it and said, let's put a sunset clause on it. So our sunset clause ends December 16th of 2019. And so we wanted to review, did it work? Was it successful? And I'm really very, very pleased to report that in fact it was. As of this year, we've had 800 licenses go through the compact transferring into Wisconsin. And why is this important? Because it's a matter of access for patients in Wisconsin, not only all over the state, but especially in the rural areas. It's important also for telemedicine delivery. And I want to give you an example. During testimony, we had heard on our first compact hearing, our public hearing back in 2015, we had a physician come and talk about the compact from northwestern Wisconsin. And he said, let me give you an example of why this is important. You have a rural hospital. It's the middle of the night. It's a weekend. That particular patient is exhibiting symptoms of perhaps a stroke. What protocol do you give him so that he has the best outcome? We don't all have thrombolytic physicians on site in many of our rural hospitals. This gives us an opportunity through telemedicine to be able to access those professionals very immediately for the best outcome for especially our rural people. So that's one of the reasons why it's very important. And as telemedicine continues to grow, in fact, Senator Cheston is hearing a bill on telemedicine. Just did. And as the use of telemedicine continues to grow, compacts like this will become very, very important. And I want to also add, this is a voluntary compact. It does not sidestep any of our rigorous medical practice laws here in Wisconsin. So we are looking forward to removing that sunset clause that I described And that should take place this fall, of course, to meet that December deadline. So I also did a nurse compact last session, a little bit different. That compact allows for nurses to have dual licensing within 28 other states. That's really important for the border states where they commute back and forth. And in many cases, those truly are very, very rural areas that they're going into, important for visiting nurse programs and telemedicine as well. So there are other compact ideas that go on in legislation along with Wisconsin and other states. So we'll continue to look at those, so we can create best access and outcomes for our patients here. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. Excellent. I didn't forget about County Board Chair Doug Mahan. You can come forward or you can just speak there if you wish. We'd like to have you give an update on solar energy and those types of things.
Yeah, I'll come forward if you don't mind.
Okay, no, absolutely perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I couldn't help but recognize Senator Texton's enthusiasm for Hampton Central, Wisconsin, so I'd preface my remarks to you this morning by saying that that is me on the topic of solar energy in Wood County in particular. There are very few chances that we get in government, whether it be city, village, county, to either substantially reduce our expenses or generate revenue. With this new technology, we are given the opportunity to do both, and I think that's very exciting for the county and very exciting for the town of Saratoga. There's some handouts I gave Angel, and I don't know if she's going to distribute them, but you can pick these up or something.
Yeah, the registration desk after we're done.
So be sure to pick one up. I'm going to give you some more information if I can. Excuse me for walking around with notes. I like to stroll, and I normally don't carry a notepad, and I know it looks very academic, but Craig, when's the last time you used one of these?
This morning.
Tom Tucker. I used to work there, for those that you don't know. So the rumors you've been hearing for the last year and a half approximately, rumblings around about solar arrays in the county. We've got some initiatives going in the county. There was some confusion what people were talking about, what people were suggesting. Those rumors have come to the light of day. There is a proposal on the table for the town of Saratoga to do a utility scale solar array. And we're talking about a 150 megawatt solar array, which is approximately the equivalent of 40,000 homes annual electricity. So we're talking about, I don't think I say it too lightly, but we're talking about a power plant in a new kind of power plant in Wood County. And with that comes some revenue generation for the county as well as some other things. I'd like to give you some brief information on it, and I'm sure it will generate a lot of questions. So if you have any, hopefully I can answer them, or I can direct you to the people that can. So first of all, the developer that's leading this project is a company called Savion. They're out of Kansas City. They used to be part of a bigger company, I believe it was called Trade Winds. They did wind and solar energy. The solar part of it got to be big enough that they split the company in two. Savion does solar only. They're in 23 states across the nation. They've done these projects across the nation. Like I said, this particular project is looking at a 150 megawatt display, fairly substantial, footprint of about 1,650 acres in the town of Saratoga. Actual solar array would be about 1,200 acres, I believe. And a little background on the story: the site was selected primarily for a couple of reasons. Number one, they were able to acquire a chunk of land that was big enough for the project from one buyer in one location, which was critical for them. Cuts a lot of red tape for them. Also, the availability of connection to a transmission line that would be appropriate for that type of power generation. So those were two big pieces. Saratoga was fortunate enough to have those options on the table for them, and so they began to look seriously at that site. There's other things that they're talking about there that they take very seriously. There's minimal visual impact from the project there with the layout of the land, what they can do, how they can arrange the panels. It's from their perspective, a very good fit for the development of this project. One of the nice things about it is this kind of project, compared to a traditional coal-fired power plant or natural gas plant or nuclear plant for that facility, no extended services. We're not going to need added fire protection. We're not going to have to do sewer projects. We're not going to see any extra travel or railroad lines, those types of things. This is a standalone project that's fairly innocuous as far as its impact on the landscape, the county, the township. Another good piece of it is there's a great workforce development work piece on there. We're talking about 300 jobs for 9 months. I know it's only 9 months, but we're talking about an industry and a technology that is growing very quickly. Midstate has a renewables program. They've talked favorably about partnering with them as far as workforce development. They want to ensure that as many of those 300 jobs as possible are locally sourced. So there is that impact on the community. Speaking of financial impact to the community, the big hitter here is that when you do a power generation facility of that magnitude, you're talking about getting money in lieu of taxes from the state utility fund, which is basically the licensing pool of money that comes from power generation stations or plants. And we will receive, the county, this project would be worth to the county about $350,000 annually, to the township about $250,000 annually. So that is not money that I don't know about, I can't speak for the town of Saratoga, but I know in Wood County, we don't sneeze at $350,000 if they're gonna hand it to us. We're more than willing to take that. Steps in the process where we are now, this is very critical for Savion, and I've had a number of discussions with their point man in Wisconsin as far as the development of this project. They're very, very sensitive to the concerns of the Saratoga residents. Given the history of what's happened in Saratoga, they are ultra sensitive to all the concerns that any of the citizens would have regarding this project. In fact, they are coming out earlier with the information that's being shared than they normally would, because they want to make sure that everybody is fully informed and aware of what's going on and has a voice in it. And so to that effect, they are also working right now, I think it should be coming very shortly, they're going to be setting up an office here and staffing it for, I guess for lack of a better term, public relations, so that people have a place to go with concerns, talk to people about the project, ask questions. The next step after that, once they address those concerns and get people comfortable with the project, with the development of the project, what's going to take place, they have some input, then the next process would be to get a certificate of necessity and convenience, which is part of an application process with the Public Service Commission. So they'll be working on that. That includes stuff like barriers, visual barriers, setbacks, easements to the power line. They have acquired easements for connection to the power line, the transmission lines. They have to present several options to the PSC. I think that decision probably will be made by the PSC, but I think there will be strong input from the community as well on that, and Savion certainly wants to address that with the residents. But that will be the next step. Then the final application would go to the PSC, and the PSC would make the final decision on whether or not this project would move forward. Basically what Savion does as a developer here is they de-risk a project. What's I think maybe a little bit frightening to some people is that Savion's not going to be the owner of this thing. They're developing it, they're de-risking it, they're doing all the environmental impact studies, they're doing all the layout work, getting all the ducks in a row. This project is going to be sold eventually to someone. And I think it's safe to say that most likely it's going to probably be sold to one of the major power utilities in the state of Wisconsin. They are, as everyone knows, they have made public goals as far as carbon emissions and things like that, and stated year-end goals for those things. So they are now in the process of closing down and shutting down natural gas power generating facilities as well as coal burning facilities, and they have to replace that power. And they are doing it with these types of projects. So I think it's likely that that's what will happen. Basically, it's going to be de-risked by this developer. They will work on a developer's agreement with the town of Saratoga. I think it is very likely that the county as well will have a developer's agreement with them. There are some things that we've already talked about, and I think that they will be of benefit to the county. I can't speak for the township. I don't know where they're going on it yet or how far they're down the road. We have not started down there yet. I think there's about a 5-minute or 5-month window here before they start the application process with the PSC. And I think beyond that, that's most of the general information I can share with you this morning, but I think that what I'd like to say is that it blends so well and the timing's perfectly for what the initiatives that we are doing on our own in the county. If you've read, Wood County's taken on some fairly unique things for a county as far as our Soul Smart designation. I know the mayor can speak to that. The city of Wisconsin Rapids has done that. From a county perspective, there's not a lot of counties that are Soul Smart designated. We're looking at gold designation here shortly. In fact, we'll be voting on Tuesday on a energy plan for the county, goals. Along with that, we've instituted an array. We're going to start an array. We've appropriated the money to do a solar array at the NEPCO Lake Shelter House, which is a year-round rental facility to demonstrate how much money we can save on electrical expense. To give you a good example of that, I think that we're allowed to do about a 40 to 45% offset on our electrical costs with the solar array. NEPCO Lake has very small usage. We're putting about an 8.3 kilowatt array there. But if you extrapolate that data to the buildings across the county, our major buildings, I think we budget $180,000 a year for electrical expense at the courthouse alone. So if you extrapolate that 45% to the courthouse alone, you're talking in the neighborhood of $60,000. Take it to Edgewater, take it to Norwood, take it to River Block, you're talking about a substantial chunk of savings on a county budget, which could definitely benefit from that. So I think that the future is very bright. Again, I would echo that as excited as Senator Testin is about him, I'm that excited about solar. I think we have a pretty bright future in Wood County, no pun intended, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. A lot of nice and interesting information this morning. Now we want to take about 5-10 minutes or so to ask if anyone has a question for any of our panelists, and I'm sure Doug would also say something on the county perspective. Yes, sir.
Scott, could you give us an update as to your effort to help the small municipalities with fire service and what you've been working on the last couple of years?
Could you also, just for the benefit of the audience, just introduce yourself quickly?
Certainly, Arnie Nystrom, Town of Grand Rapids Chairman.
Thank you.
No, that's a great question. Perfect timing, because yesterday was our big program in the state assembly. We recognized the first responders of the year from all 99 assembly districts. Fire Chief Scott Young from Wisconsin Rapids was our designee from the 72nd. Nancy had, remind me who was.
We had actually 5.
Oh, that's right.
And,
Yes, I remember. Yeah.
And it was a mutual aid effort by State Patrol, local police, and county police as well. And it was youngsters who had fallen into a local lake during January this year. One lost his life and one was saved. 3 of the officers were so involved that they were hospitalized for hypothermia.
Yeah. And everybody knows Chief Young's story too, is just being on vacation and having training kick in and saving a life there. So it's been really important to me. One of the issues I've taken on besides water issues and public benefit reform issues has been the EMS side, and trying to make sure that we've got volunteers into the future for our smaller departments, and the fact that we have good training facilities like Midstate to continue training for professional services and volunteer services. So Senator Testin's actually worked on a bill this session too, to try to make sure that we're beefing up the idea that volunteerism within our smaller departments is rewarded. So we voted on a version of a bill yesterday. There's a few of them out there that would give a tax credit for individuals who are performing that volunteer service. We're going to make sure that that tax credit gets beefed up as we've got funds available. Right now it's at the $100 level. We want to do a little bit more. Not that anybody that I've ever met in those services has done it for the money, but it sure is nice to recognize them and encourage them to stay involved and stay active. We've also worked on bills to try to make sure we don't retire their equipment too early. For a lot of you that don't know, there are time limits that some of that equipment can be used. And a lot of my smaller departments, that equipment maybe gets used once, if at all, in that time limit, and it becomes a cost of the department to replace. So we have to work to make sure that we're not putting too big a pressure on them for equipment replacement. We want to make sure the volunteers are remaining happy. Something coming up tomorrow, good timing while I mention it, is our final call ceremony out at the State Firefighter Memorial to recognize those who have lost their lives this past year in the firefighting services. So I would encourage you, if you've got time and you can brave the weather, it's going to be a little chillier tomorrow. Well, it's going to be a little chillier today than it was when we started. But tomorrow we'll be out at the State Firefighter Memorial recognizing them for their sacrifice. And on top of that, we're doing a bill this session as well. Senator Tessin and I are doing a bill this session that would reinstitute the tax checkoff on your Wisconsin income tax form to be able to make a donation to the Wisconsin Firefighter Memorial here in Wisconsin Rapids to keep that memorial preserved into the future. When it was first created, Tommy Thompson he gave the promise to the state of Wisconsin that memorial will be in Wisconsin Rapids in perpetuity. There's some price pressures and some maintenance costs that are tough to achieve for the memorial, so we're going to write a bill to make sure that individuals can make the choice to donate to them on the state tax income checkoff that used to be on the form up until 2 years ago. So there's a lot of smaller things going. We want to try to keep encouraging everybody to serve, and for us that haven't, we want to recognize the ability of those to keep moving forward. So, Senator Tessin, do you have anything you wanted to touch on that at all?
You go down the park.
Good, all right, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for, yes ma'am? You
This
could-
is Gemma from Aspires Riverview Hospital. I was curious when you were talking about the water quality project and the regulations that are changing. Overall, has the business community been accepted to those, I assume, price increase with any kind of regulation changes?
Yeah, that's another good question. I think that's the challenge that we face is that, especially in the farming community, where we would see most of the regulation changes happen, we've been slow to try to put more price pressures on them in regulation because there's no margins right now. So that's the idea that we've tried to encourage other private sector entities. The paper industry's done amazing with this. There are other manufacturers up and down the river who have bought into these ideas and concepts, and without government pressure, have been able to make changes without us telling them to do so. We put the idea out there that, hey, if you don't do something, we might do something, and you would be surprised how quick everybody responds to that. So we haven't had to go on that route. So I think everybody's responded really well, even from the farm community, to change how they've been doing their irrigation practices to their manure control systems. So people are changing their practices without us telling them you better do it right now or by then. So I think it's showing a big difference. And yeah, they've been very receptive because I think everybody's on board with this concept at this point.
Thank you.
Other questions for panelists or?
Senator Testin, I know that you lead the health service area. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing to make it more accessible for individuals in healthcare?
Yeah, so great question. So this session I chair the Health and Human Services Committee in the State Senate, and it's a much bigger role than I had last session when I chaired the Workforce Development, Military Affairs, and Senior Issues Committee. And a lot of what Nancy had touched on is what we're trying to focus on at the Senate level, is trying to increase access, affordability, and quality, specifically in underserved areas. And Nancy alluded to it, telemedicine. That's a bill that we had just heard in the State Senate Health Committee this week. This is a prime example of what happens when, and this is a good problem to have, when technology advances so quickly and then the regulatory side of it needs to catch up. And what this bill would do would actually increase access and have telehealth covered under Medicaid. And so in places, whether you live in places like Wisconsin Rapids, thankfully we've got great healthcare providers and Aspirus and others here. But if you go in other areas of the state, whether it's in places like Adams County or in northern Wisconsin, western Wisconsin, you have limited access. And so we want to be able to make sure that people can get things like low acuity care through telehealth, or the ability to see a mental health professional via telehealth. I know there are some providers in the area that even have great apps that you can download on your phone that allow you to talk to a nurse or your primary care physician if you say you have like a head or cold, or a head cold or anything like that. And this is a great way to ensure that people are getting primary health care without having to drive a long time to go see a doctor or a nurse, or more importantly, that they're just actually getting health care and not pushing it off and not going into the ER when things compound and become worse. And the ability to even use it as for like behavioral health. Some of the other things that we've taken on this session, some I would consider patient-centric reforms, things like step therapy. Now, I don't want to beat up on the insurance industry. They certainly have a role to play, but step therapy is a great example of where we're able to work with stakeholders and get very patient-centric reform passed and signed into law, where previous to this, oftentimes when patients were going through a medical condition and working with their physician and insurance companies, if a medication wasn't working, they'd have to go to the insurance company, and the insurance company would say, nope, you have to do this one next or this one next. When the physician's saying, well, we could just skip a few steps and provide this patient with the procedure or the medicine that they need and have this problem taken care of. But they'd have to go through all these steps, and so the bill that was passed basically streamlined that process, making sure that these decisions are being made between a doctor and a patient, and trying to take out the insurance companies from always stepping in and saying, no, you can't do that. Some of the other things that we've also addressed, the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, which I authored with Representative Andrew, making that permanent. We've also got a compact for physical therapists working its way through the legislature, which, much like the Interstate Licensure Compact, streamline the process, trying to remove red tape and hurdles of entry into that workforce to ensure that these professionals are getting in the marketplace sooner. One bill that we just passed this week out of the Health Committee was the CNA training requirements. So our CNA professionals, they are the frontline workers, and God bless them for all they do, because they do tremendous work at very little pay. And for years, Wisconsin's been kind of an outlier in our training requirements, where we've required 120 hours of work, while the federal standard's been 75 hours. And while some stakeholders argued, well, if you drop it back down to the federal standards, that's going to drop the quality of care for folks in our nursing home and assisted living facilities. However, when we dug down into the data through the DQI, there was no empirical data that showed that there's that the number of hours, how much training that you have relates to the quality of care. And so we passed the bill out of the committee to put ourselves in line with the federal government. It passed out of the assembly earlier this session. What was it like? It was unanimous.
Yeah, it was unanimous,
Yeah. Passed out of the assembly unanimous. There may have been a couple of detractors, but I thought it was unanimous. But we just want to make sure that for these entry-level care workers, that they don't have an extra burden that our neighboring states such as Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Michigan don't have. And working with that, and then there's a handful of other bills that are working its way through our committee right now as well, but really what it boils down to is we're trying to remove red tape, we're trying to increase access, we're trying to get more healthcare professionals in underserved areas, whether it's doctors, nurses. The big one right now that we're working on is dentists. We've got a bill going through right now. So there are 38 counties in the state of Wisconsin that are considered oral health care, they have oral health care shortages. They're basically dental deserts. And not to pick on Adams County, but Adams County is a prime example where I believe there's only 1 or 2 providers for that entire county, and waiting lists are upwards of 1.5 years to 2 years. And when you talk to our folks in the educational field, the number one reason why kids often miss school, toothaches. They're not getting that frontline care that they need and that preventative care. And so one of the bills that we worked on with the Marquette School of Dentistry would create a rural dentistry scholarship program to entice individuals that are in that program to go serve in rural areas. We would give them some tuition assistance with the caveat that for every year they're enrolled in that scholarship program, they have to spend 16 months serving in one of these counties that has a dentist shortage. Because we know if we can get them into areas like Wisconsin Rapids or the town of Rome or others, they stay here for 3 to 5 years, the probability that they will stay here for their career goes through the roof. And so again, trying to dangle that carrot stick out there to get people to come into these places and with the hope of them staying. So there's a lot of different approaches that we're taking, but what I'm really encouraged by is that, when we talk about all these issues, whether it's oral health care, whether it's mental health, I mean, these are all on the forefront right now within both houses and with the administration. So oftentimes people say, well, you guys can't get along down in Madison. Well, there are times, yeah, we have our differences, but right now, I think there's a lot of agreement between both houses and the Governor Evers administration to tackle some of these issues. And how we get there, we're working through that, but the important thing is that we are cognizant of it, and we're trying to address these issues and hopefully get some proposals to the floor and on the governor's desk.
I think one more thing on top of that is people don't realize that every state budget, we put $30 million into critical access hospitals just to make sure that we can keep the doors open in some rural facilities, and that's huge for affordability, just making sure that we make that investment every session to keep our critical access hospitals, open and available to the public, so they don't have to drive to the bigger systems in some of the larger cities. So we do that every state budget.
Thank you. Time for one more if we have. Yes, ma'am, if you could identify yourself.
Virginia Rock from Paper City Savings. This is for Senator Teston. In regards to hemp and opening up the communication, when we talk about the financial industry, we can go out to WDFI and be able to pull forms for our small businesses. Are we going to be able to access Fit for Commerce easily to kind of cut that red tape and make it easier for the farmers and the growers to come to us to do banking?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Virginia. I know you and I met, was it a week ago now, 2 weeks ago? So that's been a challenge for the hemp industry, is that the ability to leverage financial institutions. So because prior to the 2018 Farm Bill, we were in this kind of gray area where it was still considered a controlled substance at the federal level, but then at the same time, the feds were saying, well, the states, you can regulate this on your own. So for financial institutions, that puts you in kind of a tough spot that, okay, the feds say it's still a controlled substance, but yet the state's saying you can grow it. So what do you guys do? With having it removed from the controlled substance list, and with what we're doing now through the trailer hemp bill, the Growing Opportunities Act, that's going to alleviate a lot of area. So the short answer is, yes, financial institutions can lend right now. And then what we're doing with the trailer bill right now is having that ability for people enrolled in that program, if they want to have their information shared, it can be shared. So that way institutions should be able to reach out to the department and say, can I see a list of, in my area, of who signed up to grow, who signed up to process? That way you guys can reach out if you want to do so and hopefully get some clients. Because in year one of our hemp industry, it was a cash business. Think about that. That is scary. Talk about a huge risk. I know I talked to some growers that they were essentially, they put their money from their business in a lockbox and they would change locations every single night because they were terrified someone would come in and rob them. And so we want to make sure that we're providing those assurances, and hopefully we can get to a point where we can treat this crop much like we do with other commodity crops like corn and soy. It's going to take some time. The financial institutions are slowly warming up to the idea, and I know when you and I talked, sometimes it's a little frustrating, but I get the position that they're in. But I think they're going to see opportunity as well as more and more people enroll in these programs and get involved in the hemp business. There's tremendous growth and opportunity here, especially for financial institutions to get more clients.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Again, we thank all of you for attending this morning. Let's give our elected officials a round of applause. I can't speak for them, but if there's a constituent within 5 or 10 yards, I'm sure they'd be happy to sit and talk to you individually. Right?
Sounds about right, yeah.
Be a great time to be out on the patio if you want to sit out there. But anyway, we want to thank Enbridge, Urco Worldwide, and Domtar for sponsoring this today. Also really like to thank Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. Thank you for being here. That will it always helps to have that. It shows it obviously into the community. We always thank our friends at Bullseye Country Club for hosting us, and make sure you check out the table behind me. There are lots of events coming up from the chamber perspective. I don't know, anything from your perspective at all that you want to highlight at all?
Sure.
We have a couple minutes.
Well, tonight we're supposed to have our Halloween extravaganza, but we may not have doing that, so please keep an eye out for that. And And then just really check our website. We have some great things coming up. I know we have a ribbon cutting coming up for Demuth Park with the city of Wisconsin Rapids. They're going to have some great things. I believe that's October 19th off the top of my head. That is a Saturday, so definitely check out our website. We have lots of things coming up, and thank you for coming again.
Thank you very much, and we're 4 minutes early. Which is a good thing. So, again, thanks for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day.